if the only way to get this vaccine was an anal suppository in front of a live audience, I'd still do it.
Jonesy and Ray, just wondering.
Welcome back to Just Wondering podcast, where we will surprise each other with whatever topics come to mind. We literally know nothing and have made a rule to never research before recording. So buckle up.
We're your hosts. I'm Jones.
And I'm Ray. And Jones, I was just wondering about COVID-19.
COVID-19. What a tricky subject.
This is a disclaimer. We're going to talk about Corona, what we know, what we've heard. We're not going to be citing sources. We're not medical professionals, and don't take us as experts.
And this is something that I have looked up because it matters to know, especially just with like my field of work. So I need to know some things. So I will say there's a lot I'm just wondering about, but there is some stuff that I have looked up on this one.
I haven't really looked up anything except for things that are relevant to like the service industry because I need to know that for my job as well. But otherwise, I just let other people tell me things that they think are relevant or things to do to stay safe. And I just try and do those things.
That makes sense. Are there specific things that you are wondering about?
Quite a few. First off, what does COVID-19 stand for?
I believe that it stands for Corona, so the CO, virus, VI, disease, 19, like 2019, because that's when it was first discovered.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think that's what I've heard because coronavirus is the type of like virus that it is, which is like the shape of the virus, like the crown. And then COVID-19 is like this specific virus, this specific strain of the corona style virus.
Right. Like SARS is also a corona, right?
Yeah, I think the official name of COVID is like SARS-2 COVID-19 or something. SARS is also a coronavirus, but it wasn't as bad because it didn't spread as easily, based on what I learned from a Netflix show.
Correct. It was more fatal. If you got it, you were very likely to die. Coronavirus, you're more likely to get it, but you also have a higher chance of living. It's still obviously very fatal. Like it can absolutely kill you. But SARS, you were almost guaranteed to die, I think.
SARS, you could overcome. It was still like a respiratory issue, but an outbreak like Ebola was very, very deadly. And because it's so deadly, there's less spread. But with SARS, there was still like a lot of people recovered from it, but it still had, like it still killed a lot of people. But I think that COVID's killed more.
Yes, because more people have had it though.
Yeah.
So I think like if you look at the ratio of like number of people to have had the virus and number of fatalities from the virus, SARS has it would
have a high mortality rate.
Yes.
Yeah. Deaths per.
Yes. So there have been a lot more cases globally of COVID-19.
Yeah.
So there have been more deaths globally.
Yes.
But SARS, there were fewer cases, but very, very high mortality rate.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about that. I remember hearing about it, but I was, much younger. Like we all heard about it, but it wasn't around for as long it wasn't as prominent.
So I think the other difference is SARS was an epidemic and COVID-19 is a pandemic because it's a global phenomenon and because we still haven't got a handle on it at all. So it has like a major impact on not just our lives, but like SARS, it didn't affect me. I was a kid and I knew it was happening.
Yeah.
It didn't affect me. But this is affecting kids too. They're going to remember it. They're going to know what happened.
Yeah. It's obviously like nothing that we've ever seen before in our lifetime because it's been I guess 100 years, over 100 years since the last pandemic, which was the Spanish flu in like 1918 or something. And it took them 2 years to get out of it. And the population was like a quarter that it is right now, and people weren't traveling. Ideally, we're like at least figuring stuff out now. But it's crazy to think back to like March, and I never would have imagined that this is where we would be.
I remember at the start when I was first laid off, I was blowing up balloons for my housemate's birthday party. And I was like, oh, but be careful. It's like a little COVID bomb. Don't pop it because in 2 weeks, everything's going to be done. And then we're going to pop this balloon and then we're going to release Corona back into the universe. We thought it was going to be 2 weeks.
At first, it felt like it was going to end. Like we just like assumed like 2 weeks, maybe a month. And then all of a sudden now I'm like, I can't even imagine this not being life. Like, I don't even know what life looked like anymore, but I want it back.
My sister in Australia, all the restrictions have been lifted because they don't have cases. So she was saying, "Oh yeah, I only listen to this when I'm at the gym." And I was like, "I would love to go to a gym."
Mhm.
And she's like, "Yeah, just come here. We can go together." I'm like, "I would love to go somewhere."
Yeah, it is not smart
Yeah.
when you consider it to the chances of like, yeah, I could go there, but what are the chances that I would then maybe bring it? New Zealand has considered themselves as an entire nation completely COVID free. It's like, what the dream? People are going to look at that and be like, I'm going to move there. But then would that in theory not probably add to some cases? Like, I wish I could go somewhere. It's not the best idea, so not going to do it.
So you know how children aren't really as affected by COVID as adults are. And more vulnerable people would be someone who already has a respiratory illness or elderly because they're already not in the best health. They might have lower immune systems. At what age does coronavirus become a concern?
I think it is still a concern for kids. I think we are now seeing a lot more cases in children. I think that the likelihood that it's like with young people, like anyone who's younger, right? Like even people our age, we can get it, but the likelihood that we're going to get like really sick from it is a lot lower. I think it has more to do with immune system than age, but first, I don't know why kids were like not showing symptoms in the same ways. Maybe it has something to do with how the virus interacts with DNA, and maybe like less mature DNA doesn't attach the same way. I don't know about the science of that one, to be honest.
Someone that I was talking to before was saying, what a smart virus to have mutated and to have evolved into a virus that does not really affect children and only kind of wipes out the weakest people in society anyway. Because imagine it was a virus that just wiped out babies and children, like how much faster people would have worked to try and contain it.
Yeah, it's
right.
true.
But they're like, well, those old people are kind of on their way out anyway, or those vulnerable people are kind of on their way out anyway, which is really a shame because like those are people that obviously have a lot of value in society too, but they're not really they're not valued, right?
Yeah.
Like they should have value. And in a lot of cultures, the elderly are the most respected. In our society, they're just kind of brushed to the side. So a virus that kind of just targets elderly people and it spreads very quickly, like it's a virus that has evolved in a way that it maximizes its growth and distribution and only targets certain people, so it's less likely to be contained.
The reason that this has become a pandemic is because it's the perfect mix of like contagious versus deadly. So the people who are infected are able to infect a lot of other people before becoming too ill to infect other people. But the other problem with COVID is that there's a lot of people who have it who are asymptomatic.
I was wondering, do you know what percentage of people are asymptomatic?
I don't know because I don't think you could take I don't think there would be accurate data on it because imagine the amount of people who are asymptomatic who are not getting tested.
Right. No one really knows at this time. It's not just you don't know, it's that there's not really any data collected on it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there is some like taken when people go and get tested because they ask you if you have symptoms or like if you're there because of exposure or like why you're getting tested. So I'm sure that they do take data on that. But I would say that there's a large portion of that missing because if you're walking around, you're asymptomatic, why would you get tested? Especially when before they were saying you couldn't get tested unless you had symptoms or direct exposure.
Is it true that if you're asymptomatic, you're less likely to pass it on?
I haven't heard that. I don't know. I guess like probably in theory because you're not going to be like coughing and sneezing. Typically particles when you're coughing or sneezing travel further because there's more force.
That's what I was thinking as well. But sneezing is not a symptom, is it?
Probably not. I don't know. I just was imagining that. But I guess like, yeah, coughing.
Coughing and fever, I think are the two biggest. Like if you have a cough and you have a fever, you really need to go get tested.
Yeah, I haven't had any symptoms. I think the craziest thing about all of this is like thinking about how many people have not been sick. I typically get sick
Yeah.
every 2 months and I haven't been sick at all. I had like some allergies in March, but it was just like runny nose and sneezing. Like it wasn't like COVID symptoms at all. But other than that, I haven't been sick at all. But the year before that, I got strep throat or tonsillitis like 3 times.
I don't often get sick, but I agree. Like people just taking better care of themselves in general, wearing masks so they're not breathing in other people's germs and
Yeah.
washing their hands. Like those are the two major things, right? To
Yeah.
not get sick. If you have clean hands, you can touch your face.
Yeah.
I feel like I can touch my face in my own house. Otherwise, I cannot touch my face. And I am someone that rubs my eyes all of the time.
I touch my face all the time, but I always like I keep hand sanitizer in the car. So I'll like sanitize my hands when I get in the car. But you never know, like things can happen so quickly. Anyone can get it. Young people can get it. I know someone who just recently tested positive, and it was someone that I had been in contact with, and I did have to go and get a test. I did test negative, which is very nice, but I also thought it was super cool. So I went to Toronto Western and I was able to get an appointment within an hour and I got my results back within 9 hours. They have their own lab and they analyze it there. And then they also send you an email when you get your results. So you don't have to keep checking the portal. It was great.
How many times have you been tested?
Twice. The first time I went, the girl put it in, she counted to 5, like turned it and counted to 5 and took it out. This time when I went, she like, first of all, made me like scooch down in the chair really weird. But I thought she was talking about my mask because they tell you to just pull it under your nose. And she was like, no, like scooch down in the chair. And I was like, okay. So I was like leaning like this. It was so awkward.
Is it a pap smear? Like,
Yeah, I know, honestly. And then she put it
Yeah.
in and she turned it and counted to 5 3 times. I was like, okay, enough, get out.
When I got tested, I had both nostrils for 10 seconds each.
Oh,
But I got it done at a pharmacy because I was asymptomatic, but I wanted to visit elderly relatives. So you can go to the pharmacy and tell them that. It was like not a deep swab, it was just a shallow swab. And they went in both nostrils and twisted it a few times, but counted to 10. Do you have a top 5 suggestions for best practices? So we already talked about don't touch your face
don't touch your
and
face.
wash your hands.
I was just laughing about that video that we listened to, like that voice recording. Remember, like right at the beginning of
Yeah.
COVID, and it was like avoid getting the common cold. I was like,
Yes.
don't we already do that?
Yeah, so that was like the top 10 best practices. Do you remember what rule number 5 was?
Don't smoke.
Yeah, no other explanation. Just
Don't
don't smoke. Don't do anything else that compromises your lungs, I guess, is what the explanation would be. So that's a good
Right.
one.
Which is really good that I like took up smoking weed. I don't smoke a lot. I don't.
So we're up to 4 now, right? So we're at
Mhm.
don't touch your face, wash your hands, don't smoke.
Avoid the common cold.
So don't
And,
get otherwise any other sick.
and then obviously the biggest one is keep your distance and don't see people, because the only way
Yeah,
we
don't
stop
come
it
in
is to
contact.
stop spreading it. And then things were looking up for a while. Vaccines are coming.
Let's talk about vaccines.
Bad news came out today. Ontario is getting no new vaccines next week.
Why?
I don't know. I only got this information through a drop off from my mom. But I think something about money because the EU is getting them. Also, the Pfizer plant, I heard on the news on Saturday or Sunday, is now operating at like 50% capacity.
Because they're trying to renovate to make it be able to operate at a higher capacity soon. So I think they closed in a portion of it to be able to build up another portion of it so they could increase production.
Yeah, it seems like an interesting time to do it. Obviously there's reasoning behind it and they definitely have looked at all angles and it is the best choice.
Pfizer is the best choice of vaccination, or it's the best choice to shut down 50% of the production.
To shut down, I don't know that one is better than the other per se, vaccine wise. I would assume that they looked at all the different avenues and this was the best choice. Just going to stay on the positive side of it. I know there's a lot of people who are skeptical of the vaccine. They're
Yeah.
talking about it got developed too fast. There's not enough like long-term studies, but the reality is that it developed fast because this is the first time that we've ever had to develop a vaccine in this technological age, which is far superior to anything we've ever had before.
All of the top scientists were all working on this particular thing.
There was no budget. Like it was whatever you need, you can do it. And then people were talking about how it was too fast, but they had already done research and started looking at vaccines for SARS. So it's not like they were starting at ground zero. It is also a different type of vaccine than we've ever had. Instead of injecting you with part of the virus, you get part of the mRNA from the COVID COVID-19 virus, like a piece of that DNA goes into your system to help you build the antibodies to then fight it. And then there's also a lot of talk about a lot of the time vaccines take a long time because there's a lot of waiting for approval, waiting for funding, waiting for people to volunteer for clinical trials, waiting to get it into clinical trials. A lot of the time when it takes years to do things, it's not about taking longer to actually produce it. It's about waiting for other people to sign things.
Yeah.
I'm very pro-vaccine. I would get it right now,
I would
inject it into
too.
my eyes. I was talking before, I was like, if the only way to get this vaccine was an anal suppository in front of a live audience, I'd still do it.
I would rather that than get it injected into my eyes.
Yeah, but if that was the only choice, I'd do it.
I would do it too. I'm so happy I don't have to get it injected into my
Yeah, me
eyeball.
too.
I never knew I was happy about something until you said that.
There's a lot of people talking about how we don't know enough about the long-term side effects, but the reality is that you are more likely to have long-term side effects from COVID than you are from the vaccine. Scarring on your lungs, difficulties breathing, higher chances of respiratory issues in the future. Like, yes, it's a new vaccine, but the concept of vaccines isn't new.
Question that we did get is, have they tested it with other certain medications that people are taking? And is there any kind of medication that they would recommend you don't get it? Or is there a time when they would recommend that someone not get the vaccine?
So they aren't recommending anyone who is pregnant to get it just because of hyper awareness. It has been too quick to do that kind of research. Kids cannot get it, anyone under 16.
Why?
I think it's probably just to do with like clinical trials.
I haven't really had to run clinical trials on people under 16 because that's not what is urgent at this time. It was like, is it safe? Are we going to be able to protect the very vulnerable people? And then I guess as they know that it is safe for them, and then as we have more vaccines produced, we could do more trials on other groups, right?
Yeah. And I think that's what it is. So yeah, they're saying people who are pregnant or people who are like trying to get pregnant. Medication wise, I'm not sure. I know that they recently did release a list of who shouldn't get it. If you have anaphylactic allergies, then it's like not necessarily advised.
I think a lot of vaccines are grown in like a kind of egg thing. So if you have an egg allergy, often you have adverse side effects to vaccinations. I have a couple more.
Rapid fire?
What are the side effects of the vaccination?
So far, like sore arm, classic, like same as like flu shot. There were a couple people who did suffer from Bell's palsy, which is when you are paralyzed in half of your face, but it's not a permanent thing.
Yeah.
Nothing that I've heard has made me not want to get it.
When do you think that everyone will be vaccinated by?
I actually just looked at a chart today that I got sent from my work. And I also heard on the radio the other day that they are hoping that everyone in Ontario, at least, I can't speak for the rest of the world, everyone's going to do things differently, but they're hoping that in Ontario, anyone who would like to be vaccinated will be vaccinated by the end of the summer.
Both doses?
It doesn't like specify, it just says will be vaccinated. They're hoping like late July, early August.
How long do you have to wait between doses?
It's supposed to be 21 days, but they just approved for it to be up to 42 days because of the delay. So right now, what I heard, at least here, is that no one new is getting doses right now. They're saving the doses for the people who have had their first dose.
Do you know what the percentage of people being vaccinated would equal herd immunity?
I have heard around 70%, but I've just heard that in passing, so I don't know.
Yeah, I heard 75%.
That
Do you
makes
know
sense.
anything about the new strains?
But the Brazil strain, I don't. The UK strain that they're talking about is 70% more contagious, but the symptoms and sicknesses seem to be the same. And the way to deal with it seems to be the same. It's just more contagious. So, which means that it would multiply quicker.
I heard that when you go for your COVID test, they don't test for the new strains. Is that true?
I don't think that that's true, because how would they have known that people had the new strains in Ontario if they don't test for that?
I think that you can get it by special request.
I haven't heard that. I know that the first couple who tested positive for the new strain had said that they had no contact with anyone. And so they were very confused that they had the new strain. I guess they went to get a COVID test and then found out they had it. But then it turned out that they did have contact with someone who came from the UK, and now they're getting sued.
Okay. That all sounds very suspect. I think that, yeah, they're liars, and I'm happy that they were found in their lives. The one thing I know is is certain times in my life, I may not have told everyone I live with certain aspects of my life. Now that it's a pandemic, you just have to be completely open. It's just, I want to give them all of the information so they can make their own choices based on that. And you can't be offended easily. Just please don't be offended. I cannot come in contact with you. I need to keep my distance. I can't see you right now. Please just keep people safe.
This one's very long, so we are going to wrap up now. But if you have more questions, we'd be happy to do another episode. Ray, what are you drinking?
Today I'm drinking Lake Effect.
Ooh.
What are you drinking?
Trusty Miller Lite today. This is the actual only beer I had in my fridge. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
So if you have input or other things that you want to know about COVID, or can fact check some of the things that we said if they're not true or anything like that, we'd love to hear it. Yeah, open to your feedback. But so you can email us at justwonderingpodcast.ray@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at just.wondering.podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay 6 feet apart.
And Jones, I was just wondering about what?
I thought you forgot your name.
Jones,